Welcome to Let's Talk Tech with NVTC, a digital series exploring tech's most notable trends, new innovations, digital transformations, lean agile principles and mindsets, the future of work, and more. We'll introduce next-gen leaders from member companies of the Northern Virginia Technology Council and learn about the great impact they are making in our region. I'm your host, Philip Nathram. Welcome to Let's Talk Tech with NVTC. Today's episode will feature Jackie Black from Consumer Technology Association, and as always, we'll have our Did You Know section at the end. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Accenture, American Systems, Consumer Technology Association, General Dynamics Information Technology, ICF, MITRE, TalkDesk, and our media partner, iHeartMedia. You can find all of our episodes on Wonk FM, the iHeartMedia podcast app, and the DC Local Leaders podcast. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, the Consumer Technology Association's Director of Membership, Jackie Black. We're going to discuss the findings from CTA's recent Future of Work report. Yeah, well, Jackie Black, thank you so much for joining us here at Let's Talk Tech with NVTC.
Thanks for having me, Phil. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, we doubled down on CTA. I really appreciate you guys, you tag teamed it.
We love it. We love to come and we love to see this audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been with CTA for 9 years now.
I have coming up on 10 in May.
Yeah, when you find a good thing, don't let it go. Is that how that worked?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say CTA has given me a chance to grow in my career. So I've had a few different roles here, now working in workforce. So love a company that provides you that opportunity to grow and develop.
Yeah, now did you have an attraction to technology before you got started, or was that something that grew on you over time and as you were with CTA?
I'll have to say grew. I feel really lucky that I fell into it more serendipitously, which I think is great. You know, CES is built on serendipity, so I'm okay going with that in my career as well, and have learned a lot, so much about the tech world through my role at CTA, and there's still so much to learn, and it just changes so fast, which keeps it exciting.
Yeah, you were doing some legal studies or something when you first got out of school, is that right?
I thought I was going to go to law school, took the LSAT and everything, and got some good advice that maybe I should explore some other options. So I took my time before I went back to a different graduate program, and it's really benefited me now. And I think sometimes things work out like that.
Yeah, is that all from this area? Are you from the Washington, D.C. area?
I'm from Baltimore County, which my local DC husband would not be happy if I said I was from the DC area. So Baltimore, but went to school in Atlanta and then came back to the area after undergrad. Yeah,
well, that's good stuff. So you're a Ravens fan? Ravens or Washington football team?
Definitely Ravens fans. Ravens and O's, and it's been a pretty good season so far.
Yeah, he's probably not going to let you get away without rooting for the home teams up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so CTA, you guys have been doing a lot. You mentioned CES. How excited are you to finally be back in person in Las Vegas?
We are thrilled. We are going to be in Vegas January 5th to 8th. And, I've obviously been many years and really looking forward to being back in Las Vegas. There is nothing like being in person with that face-to-face experience. And more than that, there's members I haven't met yet, and some other folks that I am just looking forward to meeting in person. And of course, seeing all the new technology that'll be there.
Yeah, you got any, are you adding in any extra days on the beginning or the end to kind of just hang out in Vegas?
I used to do that. With the current environment, probably going to keep it to the show dates this year.
Yeah. Well, so we've had, some of your colleagues from CTA on, and you guys do just endless amounts of studies on technology and consumers and their behaviors and what's going on. And you've recently done one of the future of work, which I know for many of our member companies is a big deal. Out of that study, what do you think are like the three main things that have come out of it that you can think of as like the biggest anchor topics or concerns for employers, tech companies in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just back up a second. Our market research team, they do fantastic research throughout the year on a variety of topics. So this study, this is the 5th year that we've done it, which is great because we can see some meaningful trends over 5 years when we think about the future of work. And this year, even with the disruptions from the pandemic, what we see is that companies still need more employees with technical skills. So that's been a big challenge and continues to be a trend in this study. The other thing is that because of this challenge in finding workers, we're seeing more employers investing in training their workforce and different ways that they're going about that. So that's the second big trend. And then the last one is more flexible work options. You know, hybrid is here to stay. We can't put that genie back in the bottle, and companies are working to adapt for what that will look like going forward.
Yeah, what have you found in terms of hybrid work? What are companies saying that they're doing? I mean, there's some that have pivoted to all remote, but they have a hub and spoke model that I know of. I mean, what are you seeing as the trends of what does hybrid mean to most
That's a
people?
great point. It means a lot of different things depending on who you're talking to. So whether it means some of your workforce is all remote and some is in the office, whether it means more of like what I do and work remotely some days and come into the office other days, it can really vary, and companies need to adapt to those different models and ways of doing business. But what we saw from our study, for the most part, is that companies are mostly looking to bring employees in 2 to 3 days a week. We had some open-ended responses about that. So that's been the majority that we're seeing. And for the most part, employees are having a choice in which days those are to provide maximum flexibility.
And how are you gathering the data? Are you reaching out and doing a debrief with companies individually to really just kind of dig into what their plans are?
We reach out to a group of our member companies. So it's all CTA member companies who are tech companies across the full spectrum. And it's quantitative with some open answer qualitative data wrapped into that.
Yeah. And how many people or how many companies is the study of?
We got responses from about 150 of our member companies.
Yeah. And were that for all three of those categories, or did you have different
It's
were companies?
So that's actually a great point, because this year, for the first time, we asked what part of the industry the company was in, and it really was across the board, whether they were related to smart home or automotive or AI companies, really all facets of the tech sector, which I think is actually a really important thing to note when we're thinking about the results, because not all jobs can be done remotely.
Right.
So if you have a manufacturer or some other companies, it's just not possible in the long term. And I think we really saw that in the results. So one example I'll give you, because we are seeing a gradual return to on-site work, is last year we had asked about, percentage of employees who think they're going to hire employees to work on-site versus work remotely. And if you look at the data from 2020, it's more than a 40-point gap. So work remotely up here, work on site down here. This year, it shrunk to 13 points just in 1 year. So that's where you get to more of that 50-50 split of working on site and remotely. So we really saw a pretty quick return to on-site work.
Did you see are there any trends of one end of the tech industry being heavier in one direction versus the other? Are software companies more likely to be one thing versus the other, versus an IT service provider being another thing? Or do you have
We didn't break it out that way, but anecdotally, we're of course seeing some of the larger software-based tech companies are making bigger announcements and moves to remote work, whereas sometimes some other companies, especially if they're smaller, are having that on-site return. And I think it relates to a lot of things. One being that you might have had a pretty distributed workforce to begin with, and some more of those tools in place, and want to let your employees continue to do that, versus all of our employees for the most part are in the area. So it's easy for us to come back, and we want to have that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, that's a great point. It wasn't as heavy of a lift for certain companies that were already not fragmented, but they were spread out across the country or across the region, and they had some system in place even prior to last year, versus others that did everything in person, face-to-face all the time.
Yeah. And that's an important point, because I think a lot of companies who saw challenges going remote during the pandemic decided to, might have written off remote work altogether, Well, you have to remember a shift to remote work during a pandemic is not an intentional, thoughtful shift to remote work. So if employees have other obligations at home or distractions or things because of the circumstances we were in, and if the company didn't have all the infrastructure and policies and procedures in place, there are going to be some challenges and maybe some declines in productivity. But going forward, if companies are more proactive in their approach and less reactive, then we can see just as good productivity and engagement and other things that make this new world of work actually work.
Yeah, so that's a good point that, part of the onus there is also, it's on the individual, on the employee to be accountable, but it's also on the company as well to support them. And if they don't know how to use the technology, they need to encourage them to do so or put systems in place to help them be a little bit more independent if they were the type of company where things were managed by a person in person, in the office.
Very much so. I think it's really important to roll out new policies, new technologies, new systems, and communicate what they are, why we're using them, get feedback from your employees. Is it working? Is this doing what we want it to do? And really trust your employees that the work is getting done, because we've seen that it is. But keep iterating. This is still a process that we're going through and trying to figure out. It's still pretty early on. So we need to continue to get feedback from employees and have employers be willing to try new things.
Yeah. Have any of the people that you studied, what have they said about their success in using hybrid work or an option for hybrid work in attracting some of that talent that you pointed to in the beginning, that, the war on talent is still real and they're still having trouble attracting and retaining talent? What has it said about having this policy in place to increase their opportunities to be able to hire talent away from companies that don't really necessarily have something like that in place already?
Such an important point. So for roles that can be done remotely, we are definitely seeing that employers have to be responsive to that, and that they will start to lose talent if employees can find that flexibility somewhere else. So as I mentioned before, employees are used to this. They want this flexibility, and employers are gonna lose some talent. And I think we're already seeing that at some organizations if they're not trusting their employees and giving that flexibility going forward.
Yeah. Is that the why? Do you think that employees don't feel trusted? Or like, what's the reason why that is a determining factor? Is it just the convenience, or the fact that now that we've had it, we don't want to give it away? Or like,
yeah, I think that, and this is Jackie's opinion. I think that now that we've gotten to this point and what we're hearing from our members, employees get used to it and they see the benefit of not having a commute. They see the benefit of spending more time with their kids. They see the benefit of maybe spending a little less time getting dressed up every morning. There's a lot of time saving and convenience factors in there. Maybe getting a workout in the middle of the day. If you hit that post-lunch lull and returning to work later, there are a lot of things that just make our day-to-day more comfortable. And if employees are mandated back in the office and then put on Zoom meetings all day, there's a feeling that maybe this isn't the most efficient way to be working either. And if they're not trusted to get that work done at home, that's also a problem. So I think there's a lot of issues here, but I think a big factor is that this went on for so long that we get used to it and we get used to the routine and we see that this works. So we don't want to give up some of those benefits. That being said, I think there's always a case for coming in the office in some way. The reasons are just changing for why that is.
Yeah, I mean, we're social creatures. I'm a social person. I need to be around people. I get my energy from people. But likewise, you just mentioned a lot and made me think of like the mental health of the employee and mental health across the board. How much more productive can someone be if they take that midday workout and they generate that dopamine hit in the middle of the day to come back in the afternoon and plug away at things? And if it's project-based work, they get to knock that work out. If it's project-based, having me sitting in front of you doing the thing that I'm doing anyway independently, I don't know, does that add to anything? I mean, how does that make it better?
Right. We want to come in person to collaborate, to brainstorm, to think of new ideas, to get that feedback. But we don't need it for every aspect of our work. And I think the mental health aspect is really key. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we've all been under immense stress from so many external factors that we haven't dealt with before. And we're all figuring out new coping mechanisms to do that. And I think I think flexibility allows for a lot of that.
Yeah, the flexibility, I think, is the biggest key, because it's not a one size fits all. For some people going to the office was their escape in many ways, because that's where they got to decompress and focus only on work. So, you know, it's going to be an exciting time to see how it's all pieced together. But it sounds like most people are moving towards the hybrid model of giving people the option of doing both in some capacity.
Absolutely. I think hybrid's the future. And you actually mentioned something interesting about this project-based work. We're definitely seeing a lot more work being project-based. And one of the things that we ask in the study is what top skills are in demand, tech skills and soft skills. And project management this year shot up. It hadn't been in the top 3 before, and now it is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that we are working now, whether it's remotely and more of this project-based work. So we're seeing that in our results also.
Yeah. Now, and so is that some of the top talent that they are hiring for and having trouble doing so? Have you found, does your study break out job titles, and then you get to see kind of where the struggles are?
Skill areas. So we have tech skills in demand, which we're seeing project management was number 1, data analytics and engineering as the top 3 tech skills in demand. So it means that they're seeking that, and it's also over the next few years. What skills do you think will be in demand in the next few years? And then soft skills, this is no surprise because we're talking about hybrid work. So problem solving, effective communication, and teamwork were the top 3 soft skills in demand. So it just gives us an idea of what kind of is on employers' mind in terms of the talent that they're looking for.
Yeah. What are some of the other things that you guys found in, the section of your study that really focused on, I call it the war on talent, but attracting and retaining talent, that piece? I mean, we talked about having a hybrid work model being, sounds like instrumental in being able to attract some of that talent. But what were some of the other things now that we're talking about skill sets that they're hiring for?
So really relevant for the skills is how employers are training their workforce. So, and there's a lot here to dive into, but let's back up. Most of our members say that they can't find talent with the skills that they need. So how are they going to find that talent? Well, a lot are rethinking degree requirements. More than 3/4 of our members said that they will hire someone based on skills regardless of education level. Great, that's a great starting point, because a lot of people have that aptitude and maybe came from a different background than a 4-year degree. But also, let's train for these skills we need. So if we need someone with data analytics skills, well, maybe you can assess for a propensity to learn and to excel in that area and give them train with those skills once they are employed. And we're just seeing a lot more investment in employer provided training. About 1/3 of our members are looking to programs like apprenticeship and train to hire programs. And I think we're going to see this even more. Tuition reimbursement as a benefit has gone up, and letting employees not necessarily take on all that debt themselves. So there's a lot of different ways, if we can't find the talent that we need, that we can invest in our employees to get them where they need to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. So are these certification programs? I know that, so Google is a big name, Microsoft as well. We hear that in the news that they have their own internal training programs. They'll give you a certificate. That's Amazon as well, right? You get a job at Amazon, they will train you to do it the Amazon way. And it's data analytics, it's everything that's transferable. Is that what, are companies branding their own training program, or are they bringing in an outside sort of curriculum? Have you seen anything like that?
Both. So you name definitely the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts are creating a lot of their own internal ones. A lot of them can also be taken, Grow with Google can be taken externally by other folks to get those certifications. Amazon is a huge leader in the upskilling and reskilling space for their employees. They're also at the forefront of apprenticeship programs and bringing on employees to hire for these new jobs in mechatronics and others that they're looking for. So that's definitely a big part of it. Smaller companies might look to some other external programs and external training and other certifications to get employees where they need to be. But we like to tell our members all the time, Doesn't matter if you're big or small, you can invest in your employees and find the right training provider to work with to make this, to make it happen. So there's so many different paths and options. Apprenticeship is definitely an awesome one because the apprentice is hired and paid from day one, and they're on a path to full-time employment. So it's definitely a talent solution that I'm a huge proponent of.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting too is this is, we're talking about retaining. So it's attracting new talent, but it's also retaining the talent that you currently have. And if you can retrain the talent you currently have, that maybe, like you said, this is a person that was in this department that did this well, but they have this great soft skills and they're a great team leader. They just don't have this aptitude. Are they retraining from within also, or I don't know how they would determine that, or how they would put together a plan to go figure out what they already have to be able to retrain.
It is definitely happening. And I'm actually doing a session at CES on AI solutions for talent development. So there are these new companies coming out that will assess your internal workforce. Maybe I have some coding skills and nobody knew about it. And there's going to be some new project happening at my company, and they can check a database and say, all right, let's pull Jackie for this project, and make sure that we're fully utilizing her skill set for this. And we saw it happen with some companies during the pandemic. If a lot of work got transitioned to call centers and IT support, and you had to find people that maybe would have customer service skills or some other skills to help more folks on the phone as everyone was doing everything online. And I know that there are some companies that went and tapped into their already existing workforce to redeploy them in more in-demand roles rather than letting that workforce go. So it happened at the start of the pandemic, and there's definitely a host of companies now using AI and other data analytics to dive into the current workforce and do exactly that.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, and what are some of those? Did you have any data from some of those other industries that maybe don't have anything to do with technology that companies are now looking to hire talent away from, knowing that they can train them to do or put them in an apprenticeship program if they're willing? It's incumbent on the person to be willing to learn and to be open to that. But if they are, what are some of those industries? I can think of a couple, but I want to kind of get from you.
The hospitality sector, perhaps. Other service industry sectors. There are definitely a host of people that were either laid off earlier in the pandemic or saw that maybe that wasn't the lifestyle and the work that they wanted to do going forward once this pandemic happened. A lot of things that we've heard about with the Great Resignation or Great Reshuffling or whatever we want to call it in general was people really stepping back and reflecting on, is this what I want to be doing? So there's this whole group of workers that have probably great customer service skills, can think on their feet, work well under stress, are pressure tested for some of these situations, and they can be applied to new tech-related roles or other in-demand roles that exist right now. And apprenticeship is a great way to do that, or through other training programs.
I love that, right? Someone like a hospitality worker, or who worked in more of a retail environment, where if you think of the amount of people skills that they naturally have to develop every single day by chipping away at these interactions that sometimes are great and sometimes aren't, but being able to be effective and do that while managing the business of whatever retail environment they're in, or whatever hospitality. I mean, you're running a hotel if it's a hotel at the end of the day, but you're also doing that through people and making sure that they have the experience that they paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. Our president and CEO, Gary Shapiro, actually always used to say before the pandemic, he loved to hire people who worked in the restaurant industry. He just thinks you really get tested and learn a lot there. And he had that personal experience earlier in his career too, but it holds true. Yeah,
there's a number of tech CEOs, well, not just tech CEOs, but people that have started companies, whether they're entrepreneurs or they found themselves into a C-suite, and they always recall that one of the biggest skill sets they learned was by serving tables, either in college or as a teenager. A lot of them were party promoters in college. And when you think of the skill set of just trying to make that happen, where you don't have any money, you got to get this venue to agree, get the band, and you get people to pay a cover, you give them an experience that they can enjoy. And then, that skill set. Now, if you said that on a resume 5 years ago, that this is my skill set, you may not get hired in most of these tech companies. But now you have an opportunity to use what you do really well in a whole different way that you may not have thought about, that I think is pretty cool.
I do too. And that's why some of these new assessment programs, and I'm not deep in any of them, but I know a lot of them will ask about that experience and kind of intuit what skills would you have gained through that role to try and quantify in some way these different skill sets, again, to redeploy you or get you somewhere where you can use that skill that you might not be using.
So the other part of that, though, I think, and I don't know if your study addressed it, but I'd love to hear what you thought about it, was, so we know that this is what companies are willing to do because we're in the technology industry, we're having this conversation. You've done the legwork of this massive study to ask these questions of these tech companies. But if you're a person that's in a hospitality position or a retail position or in any other position that otherwise isn't related to technology, how would you know that they would be willing to even speak to you about some of your skills? Like, what work are the companies doing to promote that idea that, hey, we're attracting talent from multiple avenues, not just tech, because we are a tech company?
Right. The companies are taking a lot of different channels, and it depends on where you're going to find them. So it might be having a relationship with a local community college or local workforce board, getting that marketing out within the local community. But the success stories I've seen from our member companies who have successful apprenticeship programs, a lot of the successful apprentices are 100% career switchers. IBM, one of my favorite stories is they had a barista in their coffee shop at IBM HQ who learned about the program because he was working near there and decided to apply and went on to become one of their apprentices. So I think it can happen so many different ways. There's a apprenticeship.gov job board that the Department of Labor runs, but I think a lot of it is forming more local relationships and going out in the community to let folks know that these opportunities are there.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like companies are really, they're doing everything they can. So have they found that it's this being able to retrain their workforce and offer the fact that we're hiring for a skill set, not a degree plan? We don't want you to check a box and look good on paper. We want you to actually be good on the job, and we're willing to help you get there. Have they found that, along with offering a hybrid model, is kind of like, that's what they think is going to help them attract and retain more talent? Or is there something else that you found that, in addition to these two things, that are really hitting home for tech companies nowadays?
I mean, that's definitely a sweet spot because we're talking about tech companies, and tech is rapidly changing. So all employees are going to look for constant career development and new training opportunities. So we talked a lot about folks from other industry, but if you're going to talk about retaining talent, just of your current employees that maybe are even in a tech role, they need this continuous training and development. And we definitely see that if you put that time in and think about promoting within and giving those internal growth opportunities, people stick around. So that's where you're going to see greater retention and loyalty from your employees, along with providing that trust and flexibility. It's really a great combination of the two. And I will say, regarding retention, you know, when we started, CTA has what we call our Cta Apprenticeship Coalition, and it's a group of member companies who are learning the nuts and bolts of apprenticeship program to grow and expand tech apprenticeship nationwide. So when we first started this program in 2019, one of the number one concerns that I heard from employers was, why are we going to spend this time and money and resources in training this workforce for them to go on and get poached or leave to go to another company? And we told them then, you know, that's not what we're seeing. The apprentices feel loyal because of this training that they've had, and retention rates are high. And that was true. But what I'm so thrilled to see is that it's still true in the midst of this great resignation. You know, the more recent JOLTS report had 4 million people leaving their jobs. I think we're over 8 million in the past 2 months. It's a very difficult environment right now, but the companies that I know that have their apprentices, the apprentices are sticking around. So that retention is really being tested, and it's holding true.
Yeah, they're building a real relationship with these people. You've invested in me, and I'm investing in you. You know, and I think that's, you know, that's fantastic. Hopefully more companies will start doing that, not just in the tech industry, but across. But yeah, thanks so much, Jackie. And before you go, stick around for Did You Know? Before we go, let's talk about Did You Know? Did you know tech companies are optimistic about expanding their workforce? Only 16% agree their workforce will be smaller in the next 5 years. Only 5% of tech companies agree that it is easier to find more experienced workers than before the COVID-19 pandemic. 59% of tech companies agree that providing career development opportunities is more important than it was 12 months ago. We hope you've enjoyed today's program, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Visit nvtc.org for more information.
We look forward to seeing you at next month's Let's Talk Tech with NVTC. In the meantime, follow us at Nova Tech Council on Twitter and LinkedIn, and remember to sign up for the latest tech news at nvtc.org.